That's a good start.
Yeah. Ditto.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Difficult Conversations, where we tackle taboo topics in a safe space through empowerment and education.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to this new exciting episode. But I'm going to start out with asking the ladies how you're doing. How are you feeling? I see that there's a cup of coffee on the table and there's so much energy happening already. So welcome.
I'm sorry. I'm so jittery. This is like my third cup of coffee today.
Yeah. So I think we might have to take that away.
But you don't shove your water bottle.
I know, right? Honestly, I don't drink enough water. Well, I don't.
Okay.
And it shows on my face. But
I mean, like I said earlier, you look really beautiful today.
Thank you.
Both of you look very beautiful, mashallah.
I like your kajal that you have going on.
Thank you.
Yes. So, today we're going to be...
The hubby is the burgundy queen today.
I
love.
Kind of leaning into fall.
It's your color.
Yes, leaning to fall color. And I love this color and it's kind of highlights.
Is fall your favorite?
I like
sweater
fall.
weather.
I like fall. I like the comfort that it brings. And I think sometime after daylight saving, I have more energy, I realize. And before that, I'm kind of like in transitional space.
After or before?
After daylight saving, I have more energy.
When the sun goes down at 4?
I get up early. So I get up really early and I like the morning routines to be that early in the morning. So I'm much more productive, focused, determined, drive.
That's good.
So that's what I'm at.
Right before the seasonal depression kicks in.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It's been raining lately, though. Yeah.
I'm glad you clocked that.
Just right there.
Yep.
The calm before the storm.
Exactly. So, but today we want to talk about our people, Oromo people, and we want to talk about a lot of stuff that's related to how do we kind of cultivate, foster our community, and in a sense of like visualizing how to be driven people, creating spaces, kind of like encouraging one another. And I want to start off with kind of like general discussion where like as Oromo people, we were talking about earlier that how in the previous episode too, that we're very timid people. And we also like, we have this tendency of collective people pleasing, and where we're able to do that to outsider, but internally among each other, we're not like that. So today's episode is going to be about understanding how do we be able to being in a different space with confidence and not have this reservations and fear orientated, so we can be able to kind of flourish as people. I think a lot of that happens home-wise, environmental-wise, and so many other psychological, social behavior psychology, or sociology has an impact on that. But we're going to talk about today from a different perspective, which is kind of understanding how can we be able to create supported environment for our kids in a household that they can have that quality that we want in the different spaces. So that's the question that we want to kind of explore. I want you guys as an audience to please think about that and how ways that you guys can kind of think about your family too as well and for yourself. But I want to talk to my co-host here and ask them, like, how do you as a parent cultivate space and environment that is safe for your kids to be able to develop strength and Oromo identity?
For me and my husband are like, because I am trying to learn Oromifa, like, so we speak Oromo in the house and then Amharic, and obviously English too. We used to do a lot more English, but then now, because actually we have a Mexican neighbor that's right in front of us, and their kids are the same age to my son, and their kids are completely fluent in Spanish. So I was like, I want that. So we kind of started implementing more of the, normally I go in and out of 3 different languages at the same time. But now we're kind of staying in that language more. And even Yusuf, he's asking like, Mama, I want to speak Oromo. How do you say this in Oromo? How do you say that in Oromo? And Nafi's right behind him. Mom, I want to know too. Me too.
Yeah.
So that's like we're starting with language. And then also I play a lot of alibira in the house. And just because I feel like I want them to see that visual, of Oromia and like that Oromo sound. Because, there's a thing to music, right? Like it kind of introduces you to feelings with the language and relation to that. And there's also like this violinist that's on YouTube. She does this. It's just instrumentals, but it's like it just shows you Oromia in like like it's bird's eye view, the mountains, the waterfalls. Literally, I watched that. I sent it to Zahra when we were doing the mapping of the book, and it just puts you in that like, wow, this is so beautiful. This is home.
I want that.
Yeah.
Share with that too.
Yeah. So we do a lot of that, and we're like, this is Oromia. Like this is back home, and so we kind of do a lot of that. And obviously, it helps that we have his grandparents that are here and that speak fluent Oromifa, and that talk to him in Oromifa, order him around in Oromifa. His favorite word, I don't know, if it's not necessarily Oromo, but his favorite word is like balage.
Yeah.
He's like, you're so, Mama, don't be balage.
Is that Oromo?
I mean, you guys have Oromified it.
Yeah.
It's the origins are Amharic.
Really?
Balage.
It's like bad, right? Don't be bad.
Yeah, don't be brat.
Yeah.
So I think for me, for a long time, like I have family that's kind of mixed with other cultures and like marriage and stuff like that. And so I grew up almost seeing a lot of like Oromos around me, my uncles, my aunts, and whatever, marrying outside Oromo. But one thing I've noticed is that a lot of the times the Oromo identity or like it kind of rarely gets passed on to the kids. And so I've thought a lot about that, and I've asked myself, like, if my husband was an Oromo, would I speak Oromo? And I guess, is there something that allows other cultures to kind of, hold on to their language, their culture, and stuff like that? But that's not necessarily the case for Oromos in diaspora. That's one question, because right now, as I'm raising my kids and stuff like that, like Bonnie said, you have to be super intentional about speaking the language, because it's because all the stuff they watch, they're at school 8 hours a day. And so you almost have to push against the current in order to instill these into your kids. And the other day, my oldest, she was like, Mom, I'm the only Oromo in my class. And so right now she's at that age where she's building her identity, and she's identifying herself in relations to me and in relations to her, her family and her cousins and stuff like that. So it's really important for me. And as a parent, you have to make this decision intentionally. You have to be like, okay, these are the things that that I can choose to pass on. And I think language and culture is very, very important to me.
I wonder if you guys talk to your spouse about it, right? Like you're raising these kids and they're going to be eventually a more Oromo American kids, right? Their first identity is going to be, I'm American, and then my ethnicity and my parents' ethnicities are Oromo and they're from this land. How do you guys have those conversations with your spouse where, in a sense, that is intentional practices in your household versus kind of like ideology that everybody knows this should happen, but there's not an actual practical conversation happening inside the house? So how do you guys have those conversations? Or do you have those conversations?
Yes. So for my husband and I, we've talked a lot about making sure that we talk Oromo to each other, because English is always the easiest language for both of us, because you can, explain and stuff like that. And my Oromo wasn't that strong, actually, before I married my husband.
Really?
And his Oromo, mashallah, like,
Bonnie's like, I didn't know that information.
No, honestly, like my Oromo was not that strong. But after we got married, and the funny thing is that he would talk to me in English. And so I kept pushing back on him. He was like, I already know English, talk to me in Oromo.
Wait, pause. How did you lose your Oromifa?
I didn't lose it, but without... Okay, so for example, when we first came to this country, I knew Swahili too. But completely, I forgot Swahili.
Okay.
Because if you don't use the language, you lose it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And my Oromofa, I mean, I started from 2nd grade here. So it's like you... Like I said earlier, you're in school and stuff like that. You don't have a lot of chances to practice it. My parents speak Oromo, but even their Oromo is mixed with Somali. Because my parents, they spent a lot of time in Somalia and stuff like that. So the Oromo that I learned is like super mixed. And so when I'm conversating with my husband, I'll say certain words and he'll be like, no.
That's not Oromo.
Yeah.
That's not Oromo.
This does not mean this.
Yeah.
And so like he like first couple of years he made fun of me like to the moon and back. So yeah.
that's literally my story, except I didn't speak Oromo, like barely. I speak Amharic, and Jaylan's family, and like my family also kind of what they did is that we spoke English and Amharic in the house. So and then Oromo was like, not really that much. So and then context to that is that we grew up in Addis Ababa, right? So like in Addis Ababa,
so I guess that's what I want to know. Like that's my $1 million question, is that why, like in the case of Oromos, why is it that it's really easy for us to lose the language? It's really easy for us to like assimilate and not visibly be Oromo. You know what I mean? Like what factor, what's going on here?
So do you want the anthropology aspect? Do you want evolutional psychology aspect? Do you want sociology aspect of that answer? So what part
give me the layman's, like, I think this and this.
Okay, so here's my understanding of why we do that. I think we are surviving, right? When we are surviving, we are not thinking about how can we preserve our culture and tradition. We're thinking about how can I survive today, right? And even coming to the U.S. for Oromo people, we're still surviving. Does that make sense? Even though, like, how do we get here? War, right? How did your parents end up in Somalia?
That's true, yeah.
War, right? And so we didn't come because we want to be here. We came because we didn't have any other choices but to leave that space. So when we come surviving, it's like our generation, are the one that having the conversation, saying, how could we preserve our culture and tradition? But our parent who's living in this country or abroad in Australia, Canada, Europe, are not thinking about how can we preserve our culture. Instead, how can we make bread? How can we feed our kids? How can we protect them out of dangers that exist in reality? And so because of that mechanism, the prevention of culture, tradition, that and all this stuff is not a priority. And I think that's why this episode is really necessary to have a conversation around, is that our generation, let's not be complacent, right? Let's not be so sucked into this cultural, Western culture of like surviving, but also how can we do simultaneously a balanced way of raising kids that are proud Oromo, are in a different spaces as far as career choices or in so many aspects of it. So that's why when I ask you guys that question of like, did you and your spouse talk about it? Do you guys have those conversations, or is it just something automatically you guys are implementing? And that's why I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, and I wanna answer that question and then also address the point of the survival apparatus. Yes, me and my husband did talk about it because again, I wanted to learn Oromfa. One, because I wanted to connect with his parents and better. Two, I felt like that was an opportunity for me to kind of get my roots in my culture and roots in my, because language is the fastest way that you can get acclimated to a culture. Yeah. So that, and then because of that, we made sure that was a thing. And then also we knew that like before we got pregnant, we did a lot of research about like how kids that have roots, strong cultural roots, strong cultural backgrounds, that, like if you obviously religion is one thing, but culture is also, the more I'm going to use that word again, the more strong anchors that you have, strong ground and, fundamentals that you have, the harder it is, or the less likely you are to float, to get lost, and to also have someone else challenge or make you feel inferior, because then your identity is not based off of your feelings and emotions. It's based off of so much what Allah says you are, what your culture says you are. Your do's and don'ts are based off of not what you feel like doing and what you don't feel like doing, but it's also about like what my culture allows, what my culture doesn't allow, the traditions, and then also obviously your deen, right? So because of that, we really were into about talking about like, and that's also how I got a lot more involved in the Oromo activism. And obviously, since 2016 till I think it was like to 2020, there was a lot of like Oromo, Kero movements. It was just so easy to be able to be focused in the Oromo culture. So that's why the conversation started. And then that's how, we had that conversation. But talking about that survival apparatus, just to give you another answer too, is that Oromo people, I think, for the last 100 years have been, the Oromo language has not been, unless you were in Oromia, like I said, like in the Redawa or Badesa, or you were in Nagele or some place like that. If you went outside of Oromia, if you went or if you wanted to go to the cities, the language that you needed to know to be able to make money was a different language. It's Amharic. If you again, that survival apparatus, the ability, and then that creates an inferiority complex, right? So for those people that spoke for those people that spoke Amharic, it's kind of like knowledge instead of language.
Privilege too.
Yeah, it's like so you're more likely to get hired if you know Oromifa without if you speak Amharic without an accent. You're even easier to get hired. And that's besides your qualifications, right? And then when you come here, English is the language for you to be able to make money, to
also specific kind of English, right?
Yeah, professional English. And and then the reason why I think our culture, our Oromifa, our Oromuma, or Oromo people are more likely to kind of get lost in these spaces is because we have this culture about community. We have this culture about pushing our family and making sure that our family does a lot better than us. So our parents, they figured, hey, my accent is holding me back. My lack of language is holding me back. So I want to make sure that my kids don't have that problem, right? So they make sure that they push us into more English speaking, spaces, and they try to speak to us in English at home and all of these things. Or if it's back home in Amharic speaking spaces, that way, when you might be like completely sterilized from your Oromo accent, you might be completely sterilized from, your Oromo language in the attempt of you being not having the same issues that they did. Because again, survival, like when you are in the survival mentality, like the Habe said, you're not thinking about the future and the the preservation of traditions and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's why. I think
so that brings a really good point, because hearing you say that, about the survival apparatus, I think about the whole Maslow's hierarchy. Like we're not even past the first two levels for us to be like thinking about how to preserve our language, and all that stuff. Now going on to, now that we are here, we're in this country, I used to think about the whole idea of like a salad versus a melting pot, about what the U.S. is. And I've always wanted for it to be more like a salad, that you have all of these different parts, and all these parts are visible and you can see them in the bowl, but they're still one whole thing. And I wanted my identity when I pass it on to my kids to be that way. I want them to be American. I want them to be Oromo. I want them to be Muslim. And how do we cultivate that in a way where it sets up our kids for success? in careers, and in just the American society, and also having roots back home, because that is, I do want to go back home one day,
I think a couple of things with that, right? There is traditionally, when you're raising young kids, what are you doing at home? I think when, culture-wise, like Bonnie was suggesting earlier, like we play music, do we find Oromo books? Do we find Oromo activities? Or do we kind of have Oromo celebration as community? Do we go to like each other's house where kids are kind of like Oromo and they're kind of like proudly talking about that instead of aspect. So it starts from inside the house and what you and your intention as a parent and the goals that you have for your kids, right? So if you decided that, you know what, I want my kids to go to Ivy League college, for example, right? Then your focus is going to be solely academic, right? You're going to go into like 100%. They're going to do, what is it, Puma or something?
I don't know.
Some like mathematic STEM thing that
Sense?
It's like a tutoring things that people do after school. I think it's Puma or something. I don't know. Anyway, somebody would know in the audience. But anyway, like a lot of, for example,
I guess like I'm not dreaming of my kids going to.
So a lot of Desi kids, for example, right?
Okay.
Desi culture is academic is like all they think about. Desi parent specifically, because I grew up with a lot of Desi kids. It's like academic is number one thing. So parents are like putting their kids into this and this and this and all this planning is kind of like setting them up for their own academic success. So they can attend Ivy League college because that is a success according to the parents. When it comes to, for example, our people, our Oromo people, to encourage the identity, something similar as that, it needs to be provided with the parents, and how simultaneously they can kind of set their kids up for success when it comes to being proud of their identity. Is how do we talk about our culture? How excited are you about your culture? Like those messaging that is provided inside the household is what encouraged. Like how do we talk about other fields of career, right? Do we kind of minimize things? I'm kind of jumping a lot of stuff. Yeah. So you guys can kind of unpack specifically. So it's like, how do we talk about anything in the household so the kids can go to these other spaces that is not like them? They're able to find their sense of grounding there.
I think storytelling really helps, with kids. My daughter specifically, like we do story time every night, and kids at this age, they're like so interested and so curious about everything, and so I would tell them like stories that my parents tell me about back home, and stuff like that. And one thing I will say is that Oromo, like as Oromos, we are not one thing, right? We have so many different cultures, we're not a homogeneous ethnic group. And if you put, like, for example, if you put somebody from Jimma or Harar or Arsi, they probably need translators for each other.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's what makes it hard, is that because we don't have, like, we are Oromos, but we are like so vastly different that when you see things online, it might confuse somebody, and you have people that are kind of gatekeeping warriors, they're like, oh, this is not Oromo, or this is not Oromo, or, and stuff like that. So it makes you as a parent, I feel like, have to navigate that and find ways to get your kids to understand that as well.
So basically kind of diversifying the Oromo culture, saying like there's different...
There's different Oromos, and there's not one thing. And, we have different religions, we have different practices, and, like for a long time growing up, this is what I struggled with, is that, sometimes I felt like there was mainstream Oromo, that was being pushed and stuff like that. And then there was me, right? And so it's like, do I fit in there? And so it took a lot of soul searching and a lot of doing a lot of internal work to be like, who says this is Oromo and this isn't Oromo, So
yeah, I think I hear a lot of what you're saying, and especially as someone that kind of lived outside of, like, I guess in a way, like bird's eye view, right? I had a very peripheral vision or sight of the Oromo community for most of my life. One thing I I know is that it really is important to talk about Oromuma as in something that is just you are. It's not something that you have to prove. It's not something it's not about the way you talk. Yeah. It's not about the way you practice certain things. You are. It's in your blood. Just like, and that way, it's not something people can take away from you. Right? It's, you are that. Kalas. And that because you are Oromo and I am Oromo, there is a bond there. Right? There's a community there. Yeah. That has to be something that's extremely emphasized because, and that's also something that is very important in my family is that, again, as we were just excited to be Oromo because back in Addis Ababa, we really didn't talk about being Oromo. It was just, you're just Ethiopian, like moving around, speaking Amharic. And then obviously my name is very Oromo. All my names are very, it's very Oromo. All my, like my, you know, my uncle Mosisa, it's very, like, very, very Oromo. So, you, and then you have that, like, I am it regardless of what I am capable of or how much I know, right? Baseline, base foundation. And then when you have that relation and you're like, okay, because it's just like the blood that runs in our body, there's a white person that has a red blood, there's a black person that has a red blood, there's a Christian person, there's a Muslim person, right? So you're not surprised by the fact that there's different Oromo people that have different cultures, that have different religions, that have different identities and whatever, right? That kind of bringing it that simple, it is, I feel like, and I loved that conversation me and my grandfather actually used to have of, like, he taught me my great, like, it's like Sarto Blakim Hassan Yusuf Haji Abdullah Abdul Jali Usman Barwa. Like, I could literally go on and name my great by their first name and last name. And that gives you roots. And I think I say all of this to say that, one, we have to be able to go back to that. Go back to the source. Go back to the fact that you are Oromo regardless. That's what you need. That's what you need to connect with another Oromo person. Stop asking if that person's Harar or... It's great. You can have that.
Can I ask, where do you feel like that differentiation is coming from? Like, there is, within that differentiation, there is sense of animosity. There's sense of resentment. There's a sense of, like, the hierarchy of, like, I'm better than you kind of too. Like, I love that. That's where we should be, right? And I'm noticing how that is not where we are. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, like, where do you feel the level of this differentiating? Like, you're RC, you're this, you're that, you're Shashamane, you're Wallaga, you're Harar. Like, there is... Why is that even necessary?
Because like, I'm sorry, go.
That was it. That's what because I think it's great to talk about what we want to be versus, like, and also not addressing where we are, right? Yeah. We are at that messed place right now.
Yeah. The reason why I say that, what I was going to jump in and say was that we are human. Humans love to categorize. And it's our brain's way of finding the easiest connection, the most comfortable place, right? If you are Harar, I'm Harar, the chances are me and you have more commonalities based off of the way we talk, that what's appropriate, what's not appropriate versus me and RC person, right? And obviously me and an RC person have something more common than a Somali person and I. And so, like, we categorize and go, like it's like a Russian doll, so that we can get to that person that's the most comfortable, that we don't have to code switch with all the time, right? But then with that, just like all humans, comes judgment, criticism, superiority complex, all of that thing. Stereotypes. And we other the other person. And definitely.
And I think the hardest thing, sorry to cut you off, but hardest thing with Oromo is that even like when somebody speaks in Oromo, you can probably pinpoint where they are from.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think because you can do that, it's really hard for everybody to be like, we're all Oromo, you know,
we just have a different dialogue, right?
We are Oromo.
Yeah. No, I'm saying to those people.
Yeah.
And we have a different dialogue. We have different, and the culture is based on.
And it's beautiful. I think our diversity is what makes us really nice. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so to kind of address that, it's important to know the discomfort that comes up and how do we deal with that, right? first before we get to the actual conversation, the things that we wanted to address today. So I wonder if you guys can talk about a little bit of the discomfort that arises that creates the barriers to the actual topic that we're having today, even though we're kind of starting a little bit. That discomfort, the things that created with the animosity, the resentment, the I want to be the only person to be in this space kind of thing, right? That conversation, I want you guys to expand on that a little bit.
I think I'm sorry. I think it starts at home. Like with everything, it starts at home, you know. And I think our parents do us such a disservice when they are perpetuating these like stereotypes, or, you know, so and so is like this, Arsi people are like this, Hara people are like this, you know. And so when you hear that growing up, and when you have friends that are those groups or whatever, you kind of, it's like you look for what you've been told, you know what I mean? And it reinforces what you've been told at home. So I think because of that, it's hard to break certain things, but it's on us to go beyond these and kind of build those relationships. And I think the biggest thing that in our community that can bring us all together is these like community centers or masjids again. You know? And again, that is where our failure lies.
Yeah. You know how it's, because I think about like resource hoarding, right?
Oh my God.
When you are told, I literally, this example just kind of came into my mind.
Yeah.
During the 90s and the 80s, there was only allowed to be in the supermodel world one black supermodel, right? So, you know, the fashion shows, whatever, they will only have one black supermodel. And the minute there's a better, bigger, beautiful supermodel, they kick this one out and place this one. So that created a resource hoarding, and that created competition, not with the other ethnicities, but between these two equally beautiful, equally capable black girls, because they were all fighting for one spot, or what they thought was that one spot, right? So that, like, if you listen to a lot of like what is called, like, people models, like supermodels, old models talk about like that competition and how that was like it really emotionally draining. And even in the acting space, right, in Hollywood, actresses, black actresses, while there was like 100 billion white actresses that were thriving, right, in competition, but like healthy competition, black actresses were told that there's only one spot for you, right? So there was a lack of creating a union. There was a lack of support. There was a lack of this. That's also the same thing with the Oromo, and with like in a bigger context. That's also the same thing with the Oromo people, in the sense that, you know, when the Ethiopian, the country, was, you know, controlled by the emperor, or, you know, whatever, all these Amara and Tigray leadership, there has always been a point to make sure that the only way you can divide people is by making them one over, like, you know, fight over each other, right? Fight each other so they don't fight you. That's what happened here during slavery. Rwanda. Divide and conquer. So I think because of that, and then, you know, that kind of I guess in a way, programming, it takes a long time. Conditioning, it takes a long time to undo, right? So our parents are the victims of that programming, and they might not be now fighting over that one job, and then that also kind of, you stop separating it from why you are doing it. Because, like, again, I don't know if you guys have heard about that mice theory. You don't know why you feel this way about this people, but you feel this way about these people all of a sudden, you know, because you have this thing that you've been taught long time ago, but what you feel stays, not what you know, right? So I think that's why every different tribe has some sort of feeling about each other.
And I, like, for me specifically, like, growing up, I hear a lot about, like, my dad's war stories, you know. He was from a generation that did the whole uprising, the Bali uprisings with my grandfather, and things like that. And so when he tells us stories, it's like, these groups of people were the ones that sold us out. This tribe was the one that brought the enemy to your grandfather. And so when he tells the story, he tells it with such emotion because he lived through that, and so, but what our job is to disassociate the people back then that he was dealing with and their descendants, because you can't hold the children responsible for what their fathers
the crimes
did.
Of the parents, yeah. And also, even in that moment, right, that again, I don't know what stories you're talking about and who you're talking about. I'm just making a statement in general, which is there. Even in that moment, there's a degree of separation between the tribe and the people that did those things, right? It's not the whole tribe. Again, I'm not invalidating what your father was feeling. I'm just saying that because of these stories that we keep getting told, we don't have a moment as a community to kind of just stop and say, these people that did these things might be doing it for, gains, like capital gains. They might have been paid. They might have been threatened. They might have been whatever. It might be an individual basis versus a tribal basis, right? And it might just be also these people might be extremely tribalistic, and then there might be, that also could be. But then we have to always try to protect the tokuma aspect of it. So kind of trying to individualize it as much as we can, and like maybe even group, keep it in the group aspect. But one thing I'll give us credit for, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, is that this new generation that, either in diaspora is very awake to that more than even our generation. It's much more awake to that, much more awake to being able to be more involved, more vocal, more knowledgeable. I mean, the University of Minnesota is teaching an Oromo language course, Oromo studies. Like, that didn't come out of nothing. That came because there is a demand for it. So I say all of this to say that, yes, we are one step at a time breaking away from that, like, tribalistic mentality. Maybe we're doing it very slowly. Yeah. But I feel like we're heading somewhere.
So basically what I'm hearing from both of you is that we are also need to do a little bit of healing, and simultaneously continues to create space for one another and acknowledging that history did happen. And some of the things that we can learn from history, how can we continue to do better so that we can have a better foster community that will be kind of collective instead of kind of, exiling one another, right? So, and that is something that we're just trying to talk about here in today's episode, is kind of highlighting, okay, this is what the historical event is. This is our experiences. This is our challenges. And this is where we used to be and at in some aspect of it today too, is that what are ways that we can improve that as we move forward and in a different aspect of fields, right? This episode was kind of mainly about talking about Oromo individuals are not in a different professional spaces. Even if we are, we're not very visible, right? And the visibility is like, because we, as especially the women, even the men, they look like Somali. So sometimes it's like everybody assumes they're Somali, but they're not saying, well, I'm not Somali, but I'm Oromo. Like, they're not visibly kind of saying. And that's where the conversation about being proud and finding the identity to be important in wherever career choices that you're at. So how do we cultivate that? How do we kind of encourage our listeners or individuals that in our life that whatever career choices that you're in, how do you make yourself visible in that space?
I think reaching out and not being afraid to be the first one to say hello. So at my work, I've realized that there's a lot of Oromo people that work with me, and from cleaners to lab people and stuff like that. So now I've started to do this thing where if they look East African, I'll talk to them in Oromo. I'll be like, hey, nice. Akam naga, know? And 99% they'll respond back and be like, naga akam, what I mean? Nice. So, and I didn't used to do that. And I think on a previous episode, I talked about how I had a nurse working with me But like for a long time, I thought she was Oromo, but then we kept like passing each other, and we'll just do like this nod thing, you know. And so finally, I'm like, "Hey, come, how are you?" And then she's like, "Oh my God, this whole time I was thinking you're Somali and stuff like that." And so, yeah, we became friends instantly.
Hey,
So
yeah,
that's one thing I'm changing at work.
Yeah. I mean, I think I believe in like building coalition if you look East African, actually that's not even true. I start with black. Like,
I like that.
If you're just black,
I like that.
I am hi, my name, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't discriminate. I say hi to everybody. But in speaking
Preferably,
of
priorities are.
in speaking of,
Yeah.
building a community, I start with like, if there is anyone there that is
Mhm.
black, I will make sure to go out of my way to kind of introduce, even if it's just in a Teams meeting or something, and I see a name or I see a person, whatever. Hi, my name is that. And then, of course, you can smell the bedena and Habashas, right? Like in Oromos and Habashas. So, or
what are
you
you
can
talking about? You cannot.
No, I mean, like, you could literally look at us and tell we are what we are.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's Habash, like Amara, Tigray, Oromo, but like you're able to tell. Or Somali. You know, they have injera. There, you can smell the injera. So I make sure, hey, how are you? If you're wearing hijab, I say, assalamu alaikum. You know, what's your deal? Who are you?
Yeah.
And then kind of get into that. Building a coalition in that aspect. And then the one thing I'm trying to get better at is I normally, when I get to the Oromo aspect of it, fear starts setting in.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Why?
And because then now I want to know who you are. I feel like there's a big, again, my history with the Minnesota Oromo community is that it comes from a space of a lot of judgment, right? So I want to know who you are, what's your deal, what's your personality, like, and how close are we gonna get? You know what I mean? How close am I gonna let you get?
You did that right away?
Yeah.
No,
Like
I mean, because the truth of the matter is, right? I can say hi to a Mado person and like be really cool, like, you know what I mean?
Case in point.
Isn't that what they're called in that language? There's a reason why I use that language. I just don't know what it's called in Oromo.
Gurrachai.
Yeah, and so namaguracha. If it means something bad, I apologize. I don't know. I don't speak that language.
No. You said something correct.
Yeah, I know.
But we use a different. You didn't describe it in our language.
Yeah.
That's why she said case in point because of that.
Well, I don't count because I barely speak Oromo.
That's true. Be kind to her. Okay, she's getting there.
Okay.
So a Guracha person, it's like I can just be chit chatty, like whatever, and I'm leaving you at work. You're not following me to my community. A Somali person the same way, a Habesha person the same way.
Right.
The Oromo person, there's a chance I might write onto you with a wedding. You might know my family.
Yeah.
You might know such and such. So now I have to know, like, where is the line? Who are you? Are you that person that's going to be like, oh, can I go there? Then if that's the case, hi, assalamu alaikum, walaikum salam, boom, bye.
Bye.
You know what I mean? Then I have to be a little bit more
boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll have to be a little bit more careful. But that comes from the space of familiarity, right?
Yeah.
I say all of this to say, we have to make sure that we are building coalition, and then when we get to that space of like going to work, I do think, again, like, I want to make sure I keep giving our people credit. There is this, like, Oromo language is known now, like, there's no one that, like, in government or whatever, that doesn't know, in healthcare, whatever, that doesn't know what an Oromo language is. If you request an Oromo translator, you will have like, that's great. There's some sort of visibility there. And I remember people talking about, like, when people ask you where are you from, say I'm Oromo, and they will ask you where is that, and say it's in Ethiopia. Right? That is information building. That is making sure people ask questions, answering those questions. And what do you mean? Why did you say that? And not just Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And then you go in to explain why.
Yeah.
And all of these things. But then when it comes to visibility, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on this topic, but we have to also make sure that we show up in surveys. We show up in when we are being, like, surveys at work, surveys in the community, when censuses and all of these things, because that's how we get funding. That's how, and also when we network. Making sure we put one thing I'll say over and over again. MashaAllah, our Somali brothers and sisters are really good about this. About wallahi, they
agree.
know something.
Yep.
They know a place that has something going on. They would be like, I know you are really good at this. You should. I remember this girl. She doesn't even know my name. I was working. I was in college. I was working at a hospital. I was a registration person, and she came up to me and she said, "Hey, why are you working here?" And I was like, I really was taken aback. I was like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you?" And she's like, "No, you should be a flood because they make like this much money more, and I know you guys make this much, and there's so much more overtime, Mali." And she was like literally telling me all of these things, and wallahi, she doesn't ask me, and she's like, "Here is my name, here is my phone number. When you decide to apply for the position, give them my name as a referral or a reference." And I was like, that is so nice. You know, she didn't ask my name. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't ask whatever I was. She just saw me and she just wanted to help. And she knew she had information that might be helpful to me. They're so good about that. I've had a lot of Somali people that have been able to reach back and pull me up. Very generous with information. Oromo people, on the other hand, we're not generous.
Where do you guys think that come from? Where do you guys think that comes from?
Again, the model example that Bonnie provided was is similar to that. There's internal scarcity, right? Meaning that I don't want, if I give it to her, she's going to take my spot, right? The psyche of that, not thinking that my haq is my haq and your haq is your haq. Somali people don't think it as this is my only haq. We're generalizing Somali again, everybody's different. So it's more like everybody can eat. Whatever Allah's going to give me, Allah's going to give me. My risk is not going to be shortened because Abshir was here, right? If it's meant for me, it will be that. But there's a psyche, it's very deep in there, scarcity of that.
I think this is super hyper pronounced when it comes to business. And business deals and and all that stuff, and navigating the space for myself now. I'm trying to exercise this muscle a little bit. And, just the other day there was, because I do, I manage a business on the side with my husband, and the government, MDH was giving away, surplus supplies and stuff like that. So I made it a point to go through all my contact and be like, this is what's going on, come and get this, apply for it, blah, blah, and stuff like that. And honestly, it's a muscle that you have to exercise for it to get better. Because I don't know when it started, but we do have this tunnel vision of if I'm at this place, then there should be only me.
And I also want to just add, maybe it's not just that. Maybe it's not even that. And it could be. I just want to give a different perspective because it just came to me when I was listening to that. It could be a lot of things. I just want to give something else. There's a lot of alisi in our community. You don't talk about kanya. Don't talk about what you do. Don't talk about how much money you make. Don't talk about how you got somewhere. Don't, because it's
and
seen
the fear
as
of evil eye.
It's seen as braggadociousness, right? I know people that can't sit 5 minutes with someone else talking about themselves, about how life has turned into, and that's not in a negative way of they're wishing bad on them or anything. It's more of, it makes them uncomfortable because they think they're bragging. There's a lot of people that are doing epic things. You wouldn't know about them because you don't see them. They like to work in quiet. There's a whole culture of put your head down and work and let your work talk for itself.
I think there's more than that.
There could be. I'm just saying there's that part to it. And one thing I'm gonna say too is that when in that space, Ahun, for example, and it's not just us. I think Ethiopian Habashan people have a lot of that. There's this her supervisor that I just met a couple of weeks ago. She's air trained, and I've known her for 2 years. I didn't know she was a supervisor. I literally didn't know she was a supervisor. She's top dog. She works with the medical director of Minnesota Department of Human Services and all of these things. And I didn't know. She's just like, and it's like humbleness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I think there's a level of hasudumma there too. Like,
I mean, there is.
You want to be the only one there. Like, in the realm of like career or having a business, you know, or whatever it is, there's a level of hasudumma that I don't want to open the door for somebody else. Point blank, period.
And that comes from insecurity of, maybe I don't even want you to know how much I make. Because if you, again, I might be just giving people a lot of benefit of the doubts right after I said I'm stopping to give the people the benefit of the doubts.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a lot of like secrecy about how much people make, right? So there's like, oh, if you have the same job as I do, you will know how much I make, and you will know my financial story, right? And then there's that there's that level of like detachment there. I also think that there is the reality of sometimes the same fear that I have, right? Like, if this person comes into my work profession, are they going to take are they going to take it out into the community, and they're going to have that conversation, you know, whoever I am into that. There's a lot of
insecurity.
There's a lot of moving through insecurity in our community.
I think that's why us having this conversation is really like, it's important, because one of the most important thing is like how we have limitation in the different aspect of career choices too, as well as not bringing each other up in every directions, right? But there's also limitation. For me, I really wish there's more Oromo artists, right? Like a painter or a photographer or a documentary writer or a music writer or videographer that is professionally, they go to degree and they sustain and they do this passionately, and like not like that diversified career choice. I'm really passionate about it, because obviously I'm a therapist and I love when I can see talent in people, but I'm trying to like, Wallahi, you're so good. Yes. I told Bonnie once, I said, you would be so great as a MBA administration in a hospital setting. Like, it's a corporate setting, but the thing is that because of her skills, her diverse skills will provide so much support, not only that it brings people along, it also can execute her job. So there's like balance of her, right?
I think Bonnie, you do this really well, right? Where like whenever she sees a job post, she's like, okay, do this.
Exactly.
You know?
But I think if there is this level of insecurity and thinking like there's less, and I don't want people to take my spot, this is me talking to somebody out there listening to this episode, take a moment and ask yourself why you do that, right? Why do you feel like your risk is not provided? And how do we kind of work on that to reduce that feeling? I know sometimes I have it too. Because I think the best way to kind of make connection to other people within audience is to be honest about how you also struggle with that. I used to think that, you know what, I want to be in a specific place and I want to be the only known person. But because in my field, there's not a lot of me, right? I'm the only one there. And sometimes I'm starting to see more, right? And even in grad school, there's only me. I'm the Black person, the Oromo person, and the Muslim person, right? I'm in that space, I'm the only person. And I realize how lonely that is, because I want to talk about certain things with people in our space. I want to talk about the struggles and the concept. Sometimes somebody says like, why? Like the microaggression that happens, the barriers that happen. I want to talk to somebody that looks like me so we can try to break through it together. But if I'm the only one dealing with that, I feel like at that moment I'm the only one who has this problem. It doesn't really kind of extend to everybody else, right?
Do you think that when you wanted to be the only one in your specific field or whatever you're in, it gave you like a sense of accomplishment?
Yes, it's then that goes back to psyche, right? Now, if you are the only one, how did you feel that way about yourself as a child? Like, is it your way of like getting attention from your parents, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think about it from that perspective. Like, if you're the only one, everybody's praising you, and you did not get that praise as a child,
It's like you're filling a void.
You're filling that void. For me, it's like that. And I don't know about everybody else who feels that way. For me, it was like that because I'm the middle child. And like, I feel like I'm kind of always in the background of everybody's life. I'm not the center of their attentions.
So you're always like achieving.
Yes, I'm achieving to do that. Yeah. Because now I'm realizing at this stage of my life, like, no. Right? No, it's not that. I need more people around me. I need community. I need collectiveness. I don't want just being me. I want other therapists. I want other psychologists. I want other doctors who's doing similar things so we can talk about the actual commonality and how to make this profession much more accessible to everybody.
And I think when you guard your post like that, you can't bring somebody up.
No.
And you won't go up yourself.
You don't, because
so then everybody's just stagnant.
Exactly. That animosity I literally worked through that, and to know that that's not, and that helps with religion because Allah helped that.
Yeah.
Because when you understand Allah is a Razak, you know your risk comes from Him. Why do you have to worry about like other people taking your spot?
Don't worry about that.
Exactly. It's about who can I bring me along.
Yeah.
So talk about that experience for you guys.
I wanna just add a little bit about the diversification of careers. I think one thing as a community that we have to be really good at is making sure that we have people in different places of power, different places of employment, different careers, because if you notice, again, I love to use the Somali community as an example. There's a lot, like you will find a Somali person anywhere. In government, in police, in hospitals, in education.
Film.
In music.
Yeah.
But I need each other out of opportunity. Like we shame each other out of opportunity, or we discourage each other out of opportunity.
We push our insecurity on one another.
We are really good at a projection. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know, right? And again, not just the pulling up aspect of it, but the opening doors aspect of it, right? Making sure that people, again, what I was going to say earlier was that when you don't tell people what you've done, it's like it has never been done before. It has not been done. So that's actually my supervisor told me. She said, if you want people to know that you are valuable, make sure you shout about your work. Make sure you shout about the work that you're doing. That doesn't mean you're braggadocious. It means that you are letting them know this work wouldn't have gotten done if I didn't do it.
How would they recognize you otherwise?
Exactly.
Right?
So when we say, hey, I am in this space, right? I am in this space and I'm doing well. People would be like, what is this space?
Curiosity.
If you can do it, I can do it.
If you can do it, I can do it.
Exactly.
And just being like, there's a reason why there's a lot of nurses, Oromo nurses. There's a reason why there's a lot of RTs, right? Because they saw somebody be able to do it, and they were like, oh, okay, this person looks like me, this person acts like me, this person has, I can do it too. We have to, and then that creates also protection. Like I said, being involved in census, being involved in surveys, being able to get, scholarships and funding. And like, I told you guys, I went to this class conference that was literally being given $25,000 for different community organizations, and there was everyone there, and there was a section that said Oromo and Nay. Not applicable.
Because the results are not out there.
There is not out there.
Yeah.
And like it was Oromo and Karen, the language Karen, like Ene, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
So they went looking for us, but we didn't respond.
Right.
So we
don't
missed
even
out.
know where there's resources. That's another thing, right? Because nobody shares, like you said, nobody talks about it. Nobody have the conversation about it because it was so kind of like, Abshiro used fixed mindset. And that level is like, how do we get out of that limitation?
And get out of that survival mentality, or like that, survival of the fittest. Like we're at some point, it's not just about the amount of money you're making, but yes, there is money that to be made in a lot of different spheres that we don't know about. But it's also about making sure that thinking of the community. What does the community need? The community needs protection in government. The community needs educators. The community needs lobbyists. The community needs books, music, art, right? That's the only way you can push your culture forward.
The last thing I would want to add to that is that if there are people who are trying new careers, new professions, and you see them fail, it doesn't mean that you will fail too.
Or it doesn't mean time for you to laugh at them and kick them when they're down, because we're really good at that.
And that was not a failure either. Just because they tried and they didn't actually completed doesn't mean that it's not a failure. It's just
so
that
I think
they figured
out one more way not to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think we do a lot of like sitting on the sidelines and waiting, and because I
being like you figure it out now, jump in.
Yeah, because so growing up, I in college I did Amway, as you guys know. So the hardest thing is that when I was talking to Oromos, it's like you do it, you become a millionaire, and then I'll join.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and I think that was
we don't know how to take risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so risk averse. And then finally, like when you're constantly told that, you just were like, you know what? I'm not even gonna mess with you guys anymore.
Yeah. And also supporting our community, supporting the people that are doing something. Yeah. When we are more than happy
like
to support
supporting
Rihanna and Beyonce and whatever, like Little John and Little Jim, whatever who they are. But then an Oromo person does something, you know, that's a little bit a little bit different. Like that girl that did a whole gallery, right? Like showing up there and seeing. I was so happy to see her parents be so proud of her like work, because you don't see that normally. You know, just being able to like invest not just with our voices, but also with our money, with our capital, with my God, Oromo people, do you know that they are so stingy with their likes and their comments and their reviews and their shares?
It's a fixed mindset. It's the the resentment, right?
I love you guys.
So you love the Oromo people, right? Yes. She loves you guys. So and that's actually, I want to bring it back to like a couple of things that I want to wrap up our show today with, is that the biggest thing is that support one another, right? And that means include this podcast and kind of subscribe and share and listen to it. And
give us feedback.
Give us feedback as well. But before we do that, I want us to kind of provide some action takeaway and things like that. So that way that we can kind of give suggestion how we can open the gate of providing more ways to have this conversation. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my God, in 5 minutes. Yes.
No, I just was thinking about the conversations that we were having about building community and building community resources, like making sure we utilize the community resources that we have. Osfana, do better, be better. Make sure that you're not just creating spaces.
Slow down. Okay. You're okay.
Take a deep breath.
Deep breath.
They need to hear it.
Deep breath.
Osfana, I feel like there's a lot more to do than just leisure activities as parties that are useless, and like soccer, awesome, but parties useless. You could invest in, more. Make sure you even use your social media platforms to do more community work, and create networking opportunities.
Maybe we should collaborate with them and join some of the things that suggest stuff.
But again,
if
also, and also not even just us, other people, anyone that wants to do it, invite people to your table. And also OYA, OSU, all these communities that have platforms, that have like followers, do something with that outside of just shaking your, what is called shoulders and dancing, dancing to the music. We should be purpose oriented. The Oromo Community Center. Yeah, the Oromo Community Center that's sitting there blank 90% of the time, that has like literally people use it for rehearsal space. We should be investing into it to create debate centers, youth centers, whatever it is, so that we can do something constructive instead of just leisure activities.
Absolutely.
Inviting counselors that are going to be able to do pro bono work there.
Mental
health
workshops there, career networking spaces, education centers.
Yeah.
Put money into the community, y'all. Put time and effort outside of dance activities.
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing, as an actionable item, I would say try one new thing and bring an Oromo person with you.
Absolutely.
I'll end it there.
And I think that's the best suggestion. Thank you both. And I do want to kind of encourage the communities to get involved. Parents, please continue to have conversation with your kids. Don't be afraid to take risk. It's important at home, even outside of the community, and do not allow your kids to be afraid going out there. And if they're trying something new, allow them to experiment that with you under your supervision, obviously. So we want to appreciate our listeners and my co-host. Thank you so much for an incredible conversation.
Thank you.
In depth of ways to grow our community and collectively kind of see each other and understand each other and support one another.
Difficult conversations.
Thank you, y'all.
Okay. Bye.
Join the conversation in the comments section or on our Instagram page to share with us what you think. We do not have all the answers, and our biggest goal is to kick off and get the conversation going. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts and use us as catalysts for change.
MBC. No relation to NBC.